This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The download is brought to you by Podscribe. You can find out more at podscribe.com. This week, CoHost releases annual report on the state of podcast agencies in 2026. Podcast Movement Evolutions unveils first wave of South by Southwest talent. The surprising group of podcast consumers comprising the new age of acquisition for advertisers, and the Ambies voting is now live. Let's get started. The third edition of the State of Podcast Agencies is built from a survey of 50 podcast agencies around the world. Agencies remain small but strategic, with 76% of respondents operating with fewer than 10 employees, but serving clients ranging from startups to Fortune 500 brands. Here's a quote from CoHost CEO Fatima Zaidi. Quote, "Podcasting is no longer experimental. Agencies are being asked to deliver measurable results and ROI, not just creative audio. This year's report reflects a shift towards data-driven decision-making, strategic repurposing, and deeper integration of podcasting into the broader marketing mix." End quote. Key findings include full service becoming the norm as agencies largely handle every step of the podcast ad life cycle. Audio continues to outperform, with 35% of agencies saying audio-only formats deliver stronger performance than video. ROI and analytics remain a key desire as agencies express wanting better attribution tools, listener data, and metrics beyond the download. No relation. Podcast Movement is coming to South by Southwest, and we've got the first wave of featured talent for the conference. As a reminder, Podcast Movement Evolutions is taking place March 13th through 15th at Skybox on 6th Street in Austin, Texas. Attendance is free, but building capacity is a natural limitation, so pre-registration is encouraged. This year's lineup includes John Mr. Ballin Allen, a live recording of Table Read performing a script by director Danny Hanks, and a live episode of Scalable. This year also features the debut of the Discovery Track, a special series of 50-minute sponsored panel sessions following 10-minute spotlight talks designed to give attendees more opportunities to quickly discover new perspectives in the business of podcasting. To that note, this week, Dr. Byron Green-Kalish, EVP of Culture and Inclusion at PRX, appeared on the Sounds Profitable newsletter, writing about his experience working with Sounds Profitable and Podcast Movement to build out new guidelines for promoting equity and diversity in the podcast conference space. As the Creators 2025 shows, multicultural creators are outpacing white podcast creators in starting podcasts up to 2 times, yet the stages and platforms do not represent that. To reflect the diversity of podcasting, it's on the business side of the industry to build an equitable and inclusive space, a space where attendees can see themselves represented on stage and welcomed into the space. From thoughtful panel selection to physically building accessibility into events, so something as simple as an executive in a wheelchair feeling welcome at a conference instead of a nuisance who requires special attention anytime they wish to participate. As Dr. Green-Kalish says, equity has to be built and nurtured. Common practice in advertising is for brands to focus on the age of acquisition, targeting consumers from the age of 12 to 24 in hopes of instilling brand awareness that will translate into consistent purchase behavior in adulthood. Over the course of a year, Signal Hill Insights has been testing brand health measurements for 10 top podcast advertisers as part of the Triton Digital Demo Plus survey of monthly podcast consumers. In that time, Signal Hill Insights finds the age group most likely to recall a podcast ad from one of the 10 top advertisers chosen were consumers aged 35 to 44. A quote from the article, quote, "This profile becomes clearer when we look at their consumer behaviors. 18% plan to buy life insurance in the next year. 22% plan to purchase home or auto insurance or switch providers. And 23% plan to switch wireless providers, more than any other age group in the monthly podcast audience. Further underlining the nesting instinct, 40% plan to undertake a home improvement project in the coming year, a rate that barely exceeded the 42% of those aged 45 to 54. End quote. While there is utility in younger and older demographics, Paul Riesmandel presents the not oft discussed 35 to 44 cohort as what they are. Adults likely to have stable jobs focusing on buying homes, starting families, and planning for the future. They're also 42% more likely to be an executive or in the C-suite of a company, and 47% more likely to be a senior decision maker at their job, making them particularly attractive to B2B brands. For this final story, I've got a short but important one for anybody out there in podcast land who's a Podcast Academy member. The Ambies 2026 nominations are live, and voting is now open for Podcast Academy members. The deadline to vote is Thursday, February 5th. Winners will be announced Monday, February 23rd, at On Air Fest in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Hey, I'll be there too. Finally, it's time for quick hits. These are articles I've covered throughout the week that are worth including in your weekend reading, but I can get them condensed down in here real quick instead of top story coverage. First up, the podcast show London has announced their 2026 International Advisory Board, as well as details on submitting to be a speaker. Sounds Profitable will be in attendance, sponsoring the brand stage and hosting a badge pickup happy hour from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th. Tom Webster will also be hosting a keynote presentation debuting new global data during Podcast Show London. See you there. Advertising Week brings on DAX US President Brian Conlon, who outlines 5 actionable steps that any brand, regardless of size or budget, can use to effectively employ mid-tier creators. Inside Radio covers Podscribe's live webinar discussing data from their performance benchmark for Q4 2025. Digiday has a new profile of Goalhanger and a look at how their video podcasting strategy has been executed. And the podcast host looks at recent Sounds Profitable data on how 1 in 3 people who try making podcasts end up quitting, comparing it to the podcast host's own independent podcaster survey to find the top reasons why people are dropping out. That was the download recap brought to you by Sounds Profitable and Podscribe. I know I go through the stories fast, so as a reminder, there is one link in your show notes that'll take you to today's episode post on soundsprofitable.com, where you can click on any link I just talked about, or you can sign up for the newsletter version of the download and the download recap to be able to get every single link sent to you at publication time. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Berletta, and Tom Webster. Special thanks, as always, to you for sticking with me as I brought you the top stories from this week that you might have missed. Robot.
Download complete.